Others paired the compulsory long skirt with a white high-necked shirt underneath a plain navy blazer. The colours were purposely dull, enlivened only by a small brooch, or perhaps cream piping around the pocket. A self-imposed uniform lending a dowager air to even the youngest in the room. Like Mrs. Kaufman, the married women wore their best wigs, heavy, shiny locks that hid their hair from the opposite sex, the false hair inevitably more luxurious in texture and hue. Young single women announced their state by going bareheaded, although even the most glorious mane was tamed and tied back or cut into a tidy bob. The rounded backs and shoulders of those who had been brides before her swayed back and forth, their knees cracking as they bowed low. They prayed and sighed for Chani, for the marriage to be good and true, for Hashem to look kindly upon her and her husband. Chani's eyes burnt with tears at their loyalty and kindness. But where was the Rebbetzin? After the lessons had ended, she had promised to be at the wedding. Chani blinked and scanned the room once more, before allowing disappointment to set in. She comforted herself with the prospect that the Rebbetzin was already inside the shul watching from the women's gallery. Chani vowed to look up before she entered the chuppah. Instead, she had her prospective mother-in-law for company. Chani caught her eye and immediately regretted not being immersed in prayer. Mrs. Levy sat resplendent in a dark turquoise silk suit. A matching pillbox hat finished off the ensemble, giving her the air of a glittering bourgeois kingfisher. She sidled over and breathed noxiously in Chani's ear. "Lovely dress, Chani, although a little old-fashioned for my liking. Still very pretty all the same. It suits you, my dear." Her mother-in-law's hat had tilted, giving her a jaunty air. Chani suppressed a smirk. Mrs. Levy's extravagant copper wig had been coaxed and teased into poker-straight curtains beneath, framing her wily smile. A leopard grinning before it pounces. Chani knew better than to trust it. She stood her ground. "Thank you, Mrs. Levy. It's a family heirloom. My grandmother got married in this dress. I feel honoured to wear it." She smiled pertly and turned towards the divan, leaving Mrs. Levy staring in her wake. Having got this far, she would not let the woman rile her now. In time, they would have to learn to tolerate each other. The loathing was mutual, but it was Chani who had carried the prize, and this day was hers. The dress creaked as she sat down. It flowed over her knees and sank in sheeny billows around her feet. The only bits of Chani left free to breathe were her face and hands. The dress crept over her collarbones and clutched at her throat. The silk pulled tight, giving her an elegant long neck. Over her small high breasts, flowers and birds bloomed in arcs of silver, traced and retraced in a spidery web over her torso. Her spine was forced upright. The stays were laced so tightly, her ribs screamed for release. A double row of pearl buttons climbed up her back like a ladder. Below her waist, the dress swelled over her hips. Silver leaves unfurled on branches as the embroidery inched towards the hem. Her feet jigged in satin ballet shoes and her toes wriggled in the sweat of her stockings. Thick cuffs of seed pearls, 1,000 lidless eyes stitched through their very pupils, imprisoned her wrists. She was a truly chaste bride, her clavicle, wrists, and ankles expertly hidden from the male gaze. The dress clung to her girlish curves, though, hinting at the unexplored flesh beneath. The dress was her passport, her means of escape from the sticky door handles and eternal chaos of her parents' home in Hendon. She had never had her own room, or an abundance of new clothes. Everything was always second-hand, like the dress. Even the love she received was of the hand-me-down kind. He couldn't remember her face. A slight problem. Baruch had come to identify his bride, to ensure he was marrying the right girl. Not to be cheated like Jacob had been, when Laban had swapped Leah for Rachel on the wedding day itself. Help me, Hashem. What was she like? Until this very moment, her face had blazed in his memory, but now his mind had gone blank.